Hi everyone, it's Ren here. I hope you're doing well. And in this video, I will be making a return to the question of philosophy. In this video, I would like to make a little sort of introduction to those who might not be super, knowledgeable about philosophy, or who feel like they're not equipped to feel in their innermost being that life is inherently philosophical, or that it's important to have a philosophical outlook on life. It doesn't have to be necessarily only philosophical, but there are advantages, I think, to seeing life philosophically. Now, I'm not planning to make a video right now about why philosophy is important, because I've kind of made one video on that already. So I'm just feeling that if I were to make a new one, I would have to think about a different approach that I could take, and that in the meantime, maybe my previous video can be allowed to hold. But in this video, I would like to talk about the notion of a philosophical system, right? Because I feel like a lot of the reasons why philosophy has this tendency of being perceived by a lot of people as intimidating is related to this notion of system. It's something that has really struck me. Sorry about this. I'm doing a lot of talking out loud to myself today, so my throat is a bit dry. It struck me a lot that I'm someone who writes a lot of philosophy, and it struck me that a lot of my friends who are very intelligent people consider often that they are not smart enough to understand philosophy. Either they say they're not smart enough, or they say equivalents like it goes over my head. Had a friend of mine who very recently left a comment like this online. They say that they're not deep enough, or whatever, or sometimes that philosophers are strange creatures. And I just want to say, the intimidation that philosophy can exert upon you, it's a superficial intimidation. Philosophy itself is not shallow, it's not superficial. It's the opposite of shallow, and therein lies its beauty, in my opinion. But the intimidating aspect of it is one that can easily be surpassed if you get the sense of what the limits of philosophy are. And you see, the limits of philosophy do not necessarily equate to the limitations of philosophy. The limits of philosophy represents the perimeter of what philosophy examines. Because often people don't really understand what it is that philosophy examines. They get the impression that philosophy is about this arcane thing, and they don't really get. It's as if you're speaking a foreign language, or as if you're sort of speaking in a mathematical language that is somehow not making use, or not often making use, of mathematical equations. But in fact, philosophy is about, the domain of philosophy is pretty easy to circumscribe despite appearances. And so here I want to talk about this within the wider context of this discussion of system. What is philosophy interested in? Well, it depends upon the angle that you want to take, right? You can talk about the philosophy of many things, right? There's the philosophy of psychology, there's the philosophy of science, there's the philosophy of history, there's the philosophy of this, there's the philosophy of that. Etymologically, philosophy means love of wisdom, as you know. But in the most basic aspect of it, philosophy is about a certain number of things, right? It investigates the nature of certain domains. This is the domain of philosophy, if you like. It's a meta-domain that investigates the nature of the domains of other things. So, if you're interested in art, then you're probably an artist or a critic of art. But if you're interested in the nature of art as an art, it's usually the as an art that makes the question philosophical. If you're interested in art as an art, or in something as an art, then it becomes a philosophical question, because it means that what you're interested in is not the art itself, but how it is that it is an art. Okay? And this can apply to any topic. Can apply to beauty, can apply to truth, it can apply to generosity, it can apply to friendship, it can apply to even mathematics. What is it about mathematics that is, in the most intimate sense, mathematical? What does it mean to be mathematical? And these are questions that are philosophical questions. Usually philosophy is divided into 5 or 6 main branches. And once you know that philosophy is interested in these branches, you've sort of explored the majority of the philosophical field. You've not gone into the detail of what each philosopher has done with regards to those fields, but you will know that the philosophers that you've heard of or not heard of, and who seem so intimidating to you, you will know that they were, in their own way, each at their own level, in their own epoch, looking at an angle of this particular field or domain of fields. Metaphysics, the study of the nature of being. What does it mean to be? Metaphysics. At a sort of more local level of human being, what is the nature of existence? What does it mean to exist? So this is metaphysics in its, well, this is ontology. Metaphysics is also what must be there for existence to be possible, for anything to be possible, what must be there? So very abstract, but this is the domain of metaphysics. And from the moment that you've said this, you go into the details of it. Metaphysics. Then there is epistemology. What is the nature of knowledge? What does it mean to know things? What does it mean to have a consciousness? What does it mean to have a self-consciousness? What does it mean to have a memory? What does it mean to have an identity? What does it mean to perceive things? And in what way do you perceive them? How do you connect what you perceive with what you memorize? How do you connect what you memorize with what you will memorize a year later? How do your different memories, how does your million of memories connect with your sense of self and your identity? How does imagination bring about internal pictures of what you remember? All this vast grid, it's epistemology, the domain of knowledge, the domain of the study of the nature of knowledge. So metaphysics, how things come to be, what is presupposed by the fact that there are things and beings. Epistemology, nature of knowledge. Okay? Now, another very important branch of philosophy, it is ethics, right? So ethics, you've heard of ethics, often one of the easier fields to understand. What is the good? What is a good life? How can we lead a good life? What does it mean for life to be good? So you have a meta-ethical questions within the ethical question, okay? What does it mean? Like, not everyone is agreed on what is good and what is not good, right? And once you've decided that the good is this, the good is happiness, or the good is being rich, or the good is being generous, or the good is being altruistic, or the good is being disinterested, the good is being whatever. You know, Nietzsche probably would have said something like the good is being aristocratic in some sense, you know. So you can have a lot of meta-ethical approaches to the definition of the good, but the investigation, what is a good life? And once you've said that, how do you implement the good life? What are the practices? What are the actions? What do you need to pursue for the good life to be implemented? It must be possible. So that's ethics. Now, aesthetics. Right? Aesthetics, what is beauty? So you take all that I said about the good for ethics and you replace it with beauty for aesthetics. We consider something to be beautiful. We need beauty in our lives. Life without beauty, you know, would be a mistake. Nietzsche said, without dancing, life would be a mistake. Well, dancing is one of the arts, right? And this is an eminently aesthetic comment to say, without dancing, life would be a mistake. What is it about music? I'll give you a very simple example of an eminently aesthetic question. What is so specific about music that it can move you without giving you any direct visual image of what it represents? You do not know what music represents. It's abstract. When you look at the painting and the painting moves you, you know that you're not looking at like the reality of what the painting represents, assuming it represents something that is, you know, recognizable as a landscape or a portrait. You know that the portrait is not the person, you know the landscape is not the actual landscape, but you can still recognize a landscape, you can still recognize a person. In music, Kierkegaard would say, in music you relate directly to the universal idea because there's no intermediary image. Well, how come, in what way can we say that music is different as an art than other arts, and how do you relate to it? How is beauty defined in terms of music? You know, these are aesthetic questions. Now, another field, I'll discuss two more fields and then I'll be finished. You have logic and language. These days, logic and language are very connected, okay? They used to not to be predominantly because language used not to be as much of a focus of philosophical inquiry as it is now. In what we know as the analytic school, logic and language are really the fields that the analytic school focuses on for reasons that maybe we'll explore in another video. But logic is the study of inference. Moving from one inference to the next in logical fashion. So it ensures that statements that are made are sound and follow a pattern that respects truth. You can either identify the statement as false, as true, nonsensical, but logic is the study of valid inference. In philosophy is very, very important because you could be making an argument about metaphysics or ethics that is actually not logically sound. Okay, I'll give you a very simple example. If you say, Socrates was Greek, all Greeks were men, right? Therefore, Socrates was a man, okay? It's a valid inference, even though the conclusion is false because all Greeks were not men. Still, the inference is correct, right? If you say, well, Socrates was Greek, all Greeks were humans, Socrates was human, you have a valid conclusion, valid form of inference. Whereas if you said Socrates was Greeks, some Greeks had beards and Socrates had a beard, this is a false inference because some does not mean all. So you're confusing the all with the some and you're drawing the conclusion that would follow from the all, but you're using you had some in your as one of your premises. Therefore, it's an invalid inference. And logic, at a much more abstract, universal level, studies all the different forms of inference to make sure that the arguments are correct. Of course, in philosophy, they need to be. They need to be because otherwise your argument means nothing. A little bit like if in maths you were to make a demonstration, right? You know, like via equations, and like one in the middle were false, but you would just follow from it as though like it were actually valid, right? So it would be false. It would lead to nothing. Same in an argument in philosophy, and logic studies that. Language, it studies the way in which words that you use signify something. So you use words, you know, in your everyday life to represent certain things, to tell a story about what you've been doing, about what you plan to do, about your family, to describe something. The philosophy of language looks at the way in which words represent states of affairs. So if I say I hold this glass, my own language, you would be able to link the word glass with a glass, right? But you can see the way in which there is a metaphysical link between the sign, that is the word glass, and the actual object called the glass. And the philosophy of language studies the very, very intricate links between the sign, the word glass, but it could also be a sign in the painting. You know, the painting of a glass, it represents a glass as well, and it's also a sign. It's also a language in its own way. A gesture could be a language. You know, a form of speech could be a language in a particular tribe or something, or even like for us sometimes to speech like if I say like in French, it means I'm sick of this situation. So it's a language, right? It represents something. It represents something true. But the link between the word glass and the glass, between the word eyes and my eyes, the actual eyes, this is what the philosophy of language studies. What is the nature of language, and what is its connection with the actual world? And you can see that this is, again, a nature. What is the nature of language? What is the nature of logical inference? What is the nature of art and beauty? What is the nature of the good? What is the nature of being and existence? What is the nature of knowledge? What is the nature of truth? Once you've said that, and you've approached these 6 major fields, you've approached what would constitute a philosophical system that would have to bring all these different parts together if it were to be a full system of the representation or the explanation of how the world works and what is the basis of the world. And, you know, this is basically the core of what philosophy studies. And any approach that you could discover in philosophy, any approach that you could become familiar with in philosophy, will in some way or other, despite its own peculiar vocabulary, terminology, everything that's a bit weird about it, everything that's either obscure or just different about it, it will always be connected to the different fields that I've talked to you about. Either logic or language or metaphysics or ethics or aesthetics or knowledge. It will never fail. And it's good to keep these key words in mind and to remember that at the end of the day, philosophy is abstract, but it's interested in these things. And these domains are, you know, limitlessly open to exploration. Okay guys, let me know if that was useful, and I'll talk to you soon.